Remember this? Not everyone was there.
And it was after the final exam.
It was after the final exam?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Some people had to leave early. And other
But
reasons.
classes were still in session. So I said, what's the population of the Earth? And some of you knew. But what is the population of the Earth?
It's like almost 8 billion.
Yeah, let's call it 8, because we're all friends, right? Is it going to, it's 7.6 something. Is it going to make it to 8? Yeah, probably. When is it going to make it to 8?
Very soon.
Sure.
Very soon, right? Will you still be in school?
Maybe.
Oh, I hope not.
Very depending on.
Because it's like 4 or 5 years from now.
If you're in a graduate school.
Well, no. A graduate school beyond Wentworth, because we
You can get
speed
your
you right
doctorate
through.
in Hawaii.
Yeah, if you get your doctorate in Hawaii or elsewhere,
No, you can only get in Hawaii.
that's the only doctor of architecture, but there are doctorates all over the
Like
place.
science or architecture or like engineering
Or history of architecture or anthropology. I've had students go on to PhDs in all kinds of fields out of architectural education here at Wentworth. So don't limit yourself. So basically, we got to move quickly here. I made this graph back in 2003 when the UN compiled all the historical data. And I was like, oh, this is curious. This is interesting. We can look at the population going back since forever. And so I put it all in an Excel spreadsheet, and I generated these graphs, and I was so pleased with myself. And I was wondering, how come other people haven't done this? Well, since then, other people have done this. That was 15 years ago. But this is the original thing that I put together. And I think it's interesting still. So for the longest time, the human population was between 10 and 100 million people. And I mean for the longest time.
Yeah.
10,000 BC, why is that a useful reference point? It's what some people say was the start of the Anthropocene, because we started in a few places, agriculture started. And agriculture was the sudden increase of plant material and thus carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere. So some people say, well, there was no Holocene. What's the Holocene? What does your high school science teacher tell you about the Holocene? Previously we said the Holocene started, like 20,000 years ago, and it's the period of time in which climate is really favorable to the thriving of human society. Well, now people are saying, well, was it the Holocene, or was it just agriculture increasing carbon dioxide enough to warm up the climate, so that the swings of ice age, warming and cooling, that those cycles were disrupted, thus making it very conducive for human flourishing. Who knows? We don't know. So agriculture. And for the longest time, even with agriculture, as agriculture was getting going, the human population wasn't much. Around 1000 BC, we had a sudden increase. I don't know why. We don't care. And then it got a lot faster. So this blip took 500 years, right? But then there's another blip that took 800 years, but it was so much larger than that first blip. The first blip went from like 50 million people to almost 200 million people, right? But then all of a sudden we went from 200 million people to 1 billion people, right? It's like 200 million to 1,000 million, right? So there it is. Happened, and it went really fast around the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in Europe. So we hit the first billion around 1800. Just to see what happens next, let's scrunch this scale down and just look at this in a more expanded way. Just so that's the same data with a logarithmic x-axis. We scrunch, Sorry if you don't like math. Just think of it as a scrunch. So, here we go. And do you remember how long it took to get to 2 billion?
50 years.
130. And then to 3 billion? Any guesses?
200.
200 years? 100 years? 30 years. Just to give you a sense, I was born around, I was baby number 3 billion. That's around when I was born. That's how old I am. So I often say things like, hello, people of the 21st century. I have been sent here from the 20th century to warn you. Right? I feel like I'm an ambassador from a time long before history. Right? So yeah, I'm baby 3 billion. What number are you? What's your serial number? 1997? So here we hit 4 billion. So you're more than 4 billion. There's 5 billion. Around 86. So it's more than 5 billion. But less than 6 billion. Or maybe you're around 6 billion. So I'm baby 3 billion. You all are candidates for baby 6 billion.
Not in 40 years.
Funny, right?
5 billion here. 5 billion here.
So you're older? 5 billion something.
Yeah.
So there's 3 billion people in the world who are older than me and younger than you. And there are 3 billion, I'm not sure this is true, so I'll stop there. So you get the point. Now, do you see anything? Do you remember what I said at this point? Do you see anything changing? There's 2010, and that was in the future when I made this graph. Let's do another one. Here we are, 2020, that's about now. Right?
You were almost right on the top, though. You were almost right on the top, though.
Yeah. It's not hard to predict. It wasn't me, it was the United Nations. They're saying, the United Nations said, here's how many people were around 10,000 BC. They're also saying, here's how many people are going to be around in 2020, and they were saying this in the year 2003. They got it. They nailed it, right? And they start to give ranges because they want to acknowledge uncertainty. Remember that uncertainty thing. So do you see something about this line? It's hard to see.
It's pretty much consistent,
It's pretty much consistent.
but it's
It's
slowing
starting to
down.
decline.
It's slowing down, right? Ah, right, so everything's going to be fine.
Didn't you say it's going to hit like 10 billion people before
Yeah,
before the population starts declining?
yeah. So here we are, we're in the 2030s now. This is you're paying off your student loans gradually every month. You're in your career. You're licensed architects. You're working your way up the ladder. The population is 8.2 billion. Now it's 2050. The 7-degree rise has already happened. The seas have risen, and your firm is really busy rebuilding cities and infrastructure, and especially the Fort Point Channel area. It's going to be underwater unless we hire that firm with all those architects who learned all those things back at Wentworth, right? So you're in the thick of it now. And people are a little worried about the population. They think the big problem in the world is population. Is the big problem in the world population? No. Oh, we did this thing. Right, we did this thing. That was just depressing. So, whew! Look at that. Saved by what? Remember I said what saved us? Someone said, why? Why should the population suddenly flatten out?
Wasn't it like the resources on the earth like maxed out? So like because there was just limited amount of resources, not everyone could eat.
That's what Thomas Malthus thought back in 1777. He said, if our population is going like this and our food production is going like this, at some point it's going to cross and we're going to have mass starvation and resource warfare.
Yeah.
Was he right? Yes, but not yet, because capitalism is the miraculous machine of pumping more out of less. So we were able, through innovation and technology and human systems, to extract so much more food out of the 4% of the planet that we grow food on. And now the Dutch are doing this insane greenhouse thing where they stack up, because of LEDs are so energy efficient, I'm not worried about food anymore after reading my National Geographic from last September, because the Dutch have figured out a way to produce all the food we need, and they're exporting it to Africa and Asia and Latin America. We're good. Don't worry about food, right? Capitalism.
Well, like, as storms increase and weather changes, there's going to be different types of species that are going to go extinct, and that's going to affect the food chain. It could affect our food chain.
That's a challenge,
Yeah.
and we don't know. So, yeah, worry a little bit.
Part of the article was saying how we've already reached a point where climate change can't be stopped, and its effects are going to happen, so it's how we adapt to them.
That's
So-
the next point. Let's finish with the people number thing. Because a lot of people, and I imagine you are a subset of those people, are saying, oh, the problem is overpopulation. We got to do something about that overpopulation thing. But we've been saying that since 1777 when Thomas Malthus in London said, hey, we got to do something about that overpopulation thing. Do you know what he said we got to do? You know what he suggested? Euthanasia. He said we have to castrate poor people, make sure they don't make more poor people. Okay, let's do that. Who's with me? Right? That's not a very attractive option. So we didn't do anything. China did something, but they regret it. They want more people now. They said, okay, everybody have babies. The one-child policy is gone, right? So why is it leveling off?
Well, I also think with the storms, it's going to take out like coastlines and cities, and people are just going to die.
There is no amount of human die-off, no matter what they say on The Walking Dead or World War Z. There's no amount of human die-off that we even want to conceive of that is responsible for this. This is the UN saying, happy days, good news, people. Humans are going to stop reproducing at such a crazy rate. Why are humans going to stop reproducing at such a crazy rate?
Money can't support their children.
Yeah, it's related to that. We used to have more children because a lot of them died and we need a lot of labor on the farm. But we don't farm anymore. We grow food in tanks in the Netherlands, right? So that's part of it. So I'll give you the answer because we don't have time. Girls going to school. Send girls to school, population declines. Or the rate of increase slows down until you reach replacement rate, and then you end a nice plateau, glide path to sustainability. So the big message here is send girls to school all over the world, everywhere, especially in Africa, and just relax about the population. It's not about the population. Is that okay? Can we leave the population thing alone now?
Yeah.
So don't worry about the population. When we go back to the original scale, this is what it looks like. It is the wall. I call it the demographic wall, the great demographic wall of the 20th 20th and 21st century. Insane. We went from 3 billion when I was born to 10 billion, more or less. And here's what it looks like. Now let's get to the architecture part. Let's get to this class. Let's get to cities. This is what cities look like. Notice where the population is. Notice where the cities are. You think the place of cities is Berlin and Paris and London, right? And New York. Well, no one, I mean, there's only 7, every dot is 1 million people. So, same as it ever was, the population is in China and India. End of story. It's China and India. It was then, and it is now. When we get to the end of this video, I mean, it takes so long to go from, is this showing us numbers?
Right there.
That's a date.
Years.
I want to know number of
population.
people. Anyway, let me just say this is about 100 million. So back in the flat part of the red line. So back then, people were concentrated in China and India, and a little bit, we're going to see more in Japan and throughout Southeast Asia and this area. Today, if you draw a circle around this, more than 50% of humans, so something like 4 billion humans, live in these areas, the same areas that they've always lived. Over half of the humans live here. The big change, and population of Europe is declining. It's already going on a slow, gradual decline. The population in North America is declining. The only way the United States economy continues to move forward is immigration. And there's some population increase in Latin America. But even there, it's very concentrated on the coast, especially along here in Brazil. The real mystery is what's going to happen in Africa. Africa is the big question mark. So here we go. Now it starts to get exciting. The Black Death, you know, you see lots of dots disappearing here. The Black Death was the biggest die-off. But where does the Black Death show up in the population increase? Nowhere. You can't see it. There's no deviation of the line because this is dominating everything. So here we go. Oh wait, I want to go back. One of the most interesting things, they're not going to let me go back. But one of the most interesting things is you get 100 million people in the Americas. And then Columbus comes and bloop, goes down to 5 million. So 95% of the population of the Americas disappears.
It just said it hit a bird.
Here we go, Industrial Revolution. Boo! You can hear the popcorn.
India's almost full.
Is everybody okay? And we're going to keep going up to 2010 and beyond.
India is shining.
So the big mystery is Africa. Pretty good, right? So even this has improved. This is from like 2012. The jury is in on Asia. It's kind of hitting the middle mark. The world, there's a lot less variation in the world, so it's a much narrower band. But this is still a wild card. We don't know what's going to happen in Africa. Are we going to educate women or not? Basically, it boils down to that. There's another wild card, which is China. The punchline of most topics is the word China.
Here I put life expectancy.
Remember
at birth.
this?
From 30 years in some countries.
So the question here is, what happened? How did we get there? And I said there's no more third world. Did I say that? There used to be this thing called third world. That's when we geographically located poverty in a place. We no longer have that geographic concentration of poverty. Poverty is everywhere. Discrepancies in wealth are everywhere. The third world is here in Boston. The third world is here in the United States. The third world is everywhere. The first world, the wealthy societies, also everywhere. Asia, like China, is a very attractive place to expand businesses, not because of the 1.4 billion people in China, but because the wealthiest 1% in China is huge. What's 1% of 1.4 billion?
140 million.
Yeah, it's a big number. There are countries of very wealthy people that are not as large as the 1%. It's 14 million.
14 million?
Don't you have to move 2 decimal points?
Mhm.
1.4 billion? Ding, ding.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I think
You're the college, you're the smart people, right? You went to Wentworth. So even the 1% wealthiest minority of China constitutes a huge market. So how did that happen? That's what Hans Rosling is going to explain to us again.
Here I put life expectancy at birth from 30 years in some countries up to about 70 years. And 1962, there was really a group of countries here that was industrialized countries, and they had small families and long lives. And these were the developing countries. They had large families and they had relatively short lives. Now, what has happened since 1962? We want to see the change. Are the students right? It's still 2 types of countries? Or have these developing countries got smaller families and they live here? Or have they got longer lives and live up there? Let's see. We stop the world. And this is all UN statistic that has been available. Here we go. Can you see that?
It's
China.
China.
They're moving against better health. They're improving there. All the green Latin American countries, they are moving towards smaller families.
China,
The
Indonesia.
yellow ones here are the Arabic
India.
countries, and they get larger families, but longer lives, but not larger families. The Africans are the green
Brazil.
down here, they still remain here. This is India. Indonesia is moving on pretty fast. And in the 80s here, you have Bangladesh still among the African countries there, but now Bangladesh, it's a miracle that happens in the 80s. The imams start to promote family planning, and they move up into that corner. And in 90s, we have the terrible HIV epidemic that takes down the life expectancy of the African countries, and all the rest of the world moves up into the corner where we have long lives and small family, and we have a completely new world. Let me make a comparison directly between United States of America and Vietnam. 1964. America had small families and long life. Vietnam had large families and short lives. And this is what happens. The data during the war indicate that even with all the death, there was an improvement of life expectancy. By the end of the year, the family planning started in Vietnam, and they went for smaller families. And the United States up there is getting for longer life, keeping family size. And in the 80s now, they give up planning and they go for market economy, and it moves faster even in social life. And today we have in Vietnam the same life expectancy and the same family size here in Vietnam 2003 as in the United States 1974 by the end of the war. I think we all...
So, we kind of have to,
This is the
well,
The
let's
author
stop with
of
this.
The New York Times Magazine report, Nathaniel Rich, joins me now from
No.
New Orleans.
Let's skip that. So, now comes the thing you should be most interested in, which is how do I do what I'm supposed to do for this assignment for Wednesday? So, do you have the examples? Well, let me just correct your misperception that the thing that I passed out, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that thing. So this is an assignment that a student produced in the graduate program. So if you're doing this and you think that's fun, you should apply to the graduate program. But I should have done this. This is what it should have looked like, and I apologize. Don't look at that. And certainly don't do that. don't look at that and don't do that. Look at the sketch writing and do something like that. And if you want to do it by hand, go ahead. Just upload to Blackboard JPEGs or PDF or whatever floats your boat.
Do you want the schedule to it, or just write?
So for every Friday, the assignment for every Friday is to read the reading and perform and engage in that reading by using your sketch writing. Period. So how long did it take you to do that whole thing?
2 hours reading and writing.
But you just did the sketch writing, or you did the whole thing?
I just did like the sketch writing.
Okay, 2 hours.
Mine took
It's
2
4
hours and
hours.
40 minutes.
And you did the whole thing? Or you just did the sketch writing?
5 to 6.
4 hours.
5
5 hours.
took me like 3 or 4 hours.
3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, I'll say 3 or 4.
Too long.
But I did the whole thing.
Like the whole day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So step 1, don't do the whole thing. Step 2, do the reading and the sketch writing. And this was a short-ish reading. We're going to get longer and more complex. Because there's a lot of literature associated with this topic.
With Anthropocene?
No, Anthropocene, we're moving on.
Urbanism.
So, yeah.
So what's focused on the analysis?
So on the analysis, this is the outcome.
The city of New Orleans, located in the state of Louisiana, currently sits 1 to 2 feet below sea level. This was only made possible by a system of levees that keep any water that would normally flood the city out. In 2005, one of these levees burst, not due to Hurricane Katrina, but due to poor design and construction. On the right side, where no levee bursts occurred, the city is left untouched, whereas on the left, 15 to 25 feet of water flooded half of the city, and billions of dollars of damage were caused. Here, people are trying to swim through what used to be their streets, and this was caused for a major change in how these things, like levees, are designed and constructed. Here is the new proposed storm surge barrier that was built. It is essentially just a bigger and stronger levee. Wagner and Ball architects are trying to bring a new idea to urban planning in New Orleans, where people live naturally with more water around them. Thus, when water levels do rise during storm surges, there's more place for the water to be channeled to, causing less flooding.
So 1 minute, and I'm going to say one image. 1 minute, one image. You can put in other images for 20 seconds just to support the idea. But the key here is to use analytical tools to support.
People of sea would normally New Orleans, located in the state of Louisiana.
The trick is to use the image itself to try to highlight.
The Temple Mount, located in the Jerusalem, Israel. Monumental Islamic
So Ken Burns effect, zooming in, zooming out,
religious beliefs and practices
overlays in Photoshop
for the Jerusalem
to
population.
point out the details of what evidence there is. And then an argument that takes that evidence and makes a logical sequence of points to support an insight. And you're not going to know what the insight that you're supporting is until you try to write an argument.
It gives opportunity to social relationships. Residents
Second image, less than 20 seconds of the 60 seconds.
easy equal access to institutions. Also keeping the mosque
Back to the
within
original.
walking distance make
Keeping the mosque within walking distance, so there's a relationship between the residential quarters, the key institutional, the public open space. It's a system. And you see the architectural space in the foreground with humans actually using that space. You see the formal spatial institutional arrangement of architecture in relationship to a larger system of an urban arrangement. And so this is a great image. If you read the second part of the syllabus, where it starts with analysis, the assignment for Wednesday starts with the word analysis. Your task is to choose an example of extreme weather, catastrophe, something Anthropocene related. So you know a lot about the Anthropocene now. Your job now is to use that knowledge, demonstrate that that knowledge opens your eyes to understanding the world. The world is the number one source of all understanding. So go to that world, images probably on the web, especially views that are from above, that gives you architectural space in the foreground and the larger urban architectural system in the background. And then, just like on Sesame Street when they say one of these things is not like the other, did you watch, do you know what Sesame Street is? How old are you? Right? They play that game, one of these things is not like the other. So if you have a highlighter pen or a mouse and you're using Photoshop, you say, well, there's a wall, that's a thing. And I guess, I'm not sure where it continues, but this is different from that, and that's different from this. And so there's a lot going on here, right?
The Temple Mount located in the Jerusalem Israel. Monumental
How do I turn off the volume?
features located in
There it
the
is.
Temple Mount.
So, and there's the open space, there's the madrasa, there's the mosque. It's like a system. And so she noticed something, she highlighted it, she took a screenshot, then she noticed something else, she highlighted it, took a screenshot, and then she basically turns on QuickTime Player to do a screen capture and talks her 120-word argument. She just reads it as she moves through the slides that she's the screenshots that she's set up. And very quickly, you don't need to use Premiere or Final Cut. It's just screen capture. Get it down to 1 minute video. Does that make sense? So read page 5 and 6 of this to figure out what the assignment is for Wednesday. And we're going to do this 11 times. I'm going to try to give you feedback on the first times before you do it the second time so you can do better. Grading. I'm going to grade you on the first 2 assignments the same way I'm going to grade you on the final assignments. I'm not going to take it easy on you. You're going to get low grades. Right? Sorry, and you're welcome. What you're doing is you're getting used to what the expectations are, what are the standards, and then at the end of the semester, if you do 11 of them, I'm going to just erase your lowest grade, whatever that is. It's just going to go away. Plus, you should look at the grading scale. Out of 20 points, if you get 15, that's an F, right? If you translate it to the 100-point scale. Not in this class. 15 is pretty damn good, B+. 10, B-. If you get 6 or 5, you're in trouble, right? 5